Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Boyer, and I'm the Vice President of Global Technology, Security and Technology Policy at AT&T, and currently serve as Chairman of the Open RAN Policy Coalition. Thank you for attending today's event, a virtual discussion about the role of Open RAN security in 5G networks. A common issue raised about Open RAN is the security challenge created by shifting to a disaggregated or open environment. While there are certainly generic security risks with any underlying architecture, security controls exist to meet the common challenges, and there are new capabilities enabled by 5G that will improve security regardless of the underlying architecture. At the same time, the benefits of innovation and supplier diversity in an open ecosystem will bring forward additional diverse security solutions to address potential threats. We're hoping that today's discussion can shed some light on this important topic. We'll begin with a keynote address from Andre Fuchs, Executive Vice President and Chief Technology Officer at AT&T, followed by a fireside chat with Amit Mittal, Special Assistant to the President and Senior Director at the National Security Council in the White House, and Diane Ronaldo, Executive Director of the Open RAN Policy Coalition. Following the fireside chat, Diane will introduce Monica Paolini, who's the founder and principal of Cinza Philippe. Monica will moderate a panel discussion with industry representatives to share their perspective on network security threats and the Open RAN. You can find detailed bios for today's speakers on the AT&T Connect's website. As always, I encourage you to engage in the conversation on Twitter at hashtag ATT Policy Forum, all in one word. We will take questions today during the panel portion of the event. You can see a green button on your screen that says submit a question. By clicking that, you will have the opportunity to submit a question to the session moderator. Whether you are close to this topic or just joining this event to get a taste of the issue, I assure you will learn something important and interesting from our discussion today. I'd like to thank you for spending your afternoon with the AT&T Policy Forum, and will now hand the mic over to Andre Fuchs to get us started.
Okay, thank you, Chris, and it's really great to be with all of you today. Again, my name is Andre Fuchs. In addition to leading AT&T Labs, I also have the distinct honor of serving as chair of the O-RAN Alliance Board. A little bit about the O-RAN Alliance. It's a worldwide community of more than 300 operators, vendors, and research and academic institutions. And we're all working hard towards a very intelligent, open, virtualized, and fully interoperable mobile network. And all of this is really with a goal in mind of accelerating the pace of innovation throughout our networks. As one of the founding members of the O-RAN Alliance, AT&T is proud to be a leader in guiding its strategic direction. And we're active in all O-RAN working groups and focus groups. And one particular focus I'd like to talk about today, which is on all of our minds, is security. So tackling security challenges is a priority for the Alliance because of this significant security benefits that the Open RAN can really make happen. And I want to give you a quick little example of that. Excuse me, nearly all of our today's pre-Open RAN implementations use deployed interfaces such as the front haul interface that are not specified in detail by 3GPP and really have no industry-wide security specifications. This means each individual operator must decide which vendors to trust and to take upon itself to assess each vendor's security approach and implementation. But the Alliance is working to replace this ad hoc security by obscurity with an industry-wide open and disciplined approach. The Security Focus Group is finding that they can't just document existing practices, and this is really all about a new groundbreaking work effort. The Alliance has produced and is continuing to extend 4 specification documents covering risk-based threat modeling and remediation analysis, security requirements, security protocol specifications, and security test specifications. And I'm pleased to share that the Security Focus Group is on track to deliver a baseline of security specifications that will cover most of the O-RAN architecture by the middle of this year. So why Open RAN? Security is always important, but it's worth talking about why these developments will be so crucial for 5G in particular. That's because 5G's wide range of services, applications, and spectrum means network operators face a much more complex array of choices and parameters in the network. Building networks based on an open architecture with open interfaces to incorporate AI and machine learning technology helps us better navigate this complexity. For example, a more intelligent RAN will enable operators to deploy security capabilities closer to the network edge, allowing us to respond to threats more quickly and shift network capacity on demand. Open architecture also allows operators to choose and apply up-to-date security patches available for commercial off-the-shelf components deployed in their networks. And it helps carriers address security vulnerabilities proactively, instead of being dependent upon individual vendors to make these updates. So when we put these benefits together, an Open RAN-enabled and machine learning-driven 5G network will introduce a new era where mobile communications empower global economic infrastructure and enable new capabilities within an enterprise between businesses and, of course, for our end consumers. But Open RAN, like 5G itself, will not show up magically overnight. It will be deployed gradually, with some interfaces and capabilities showing up earlier than others. So where are we in this open architecture and deployments? AT&T is conducting live trials leveraging our O-RAN Alliance work that includes open interfaces, APIs, and virtualized RAN type technologies. We're seeing significant progress in the areas of RAN intelligent controllers and service management orchestration, as well as with our open hardware platforms through our open disaggregated routing program. We plan to begin adding Open RAN compliant equipment into the network within the next year, beginning with indoor networks first, since they're often relatively simple to install and operate. When we are comfortable with its in-building usage of Open RAN technology, we will begin Open RAN deployments in outdoor settings and rural areas. We will continue to assess the right blend as our network slowly shifts from traditional RAN designs to a more open RAN technology. We were one of the early pioneers in adopting open architecture and software-defined networks, and we have witnessed and continue to be optimistic with the benefits that this will bring. Now, that's all for me now. I just thank you very much for inviting me to speak, and I hope all of you enjoy hearing from our speakers today and panelists.
Thank you so much, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to moderate this panel. And it is a pleasure because I've been doing a lot of work on Open RAN, and security really is a key issue. No matter how good a technology is, it also has to prove itself on the security front. And in our panel today, we're going to talk a little bit, we're going to go a little bit deeper and talk about what is that operators, vendors, the whole ecosystem can do to make sure that Open RAN is secure, and in fact improves on security, because security is it's a constant target. We always want to get better at it. All right. So today I have with me two very knowledgeable panelists. I have Jeff Allen is with us today. He is the CTO in the Communication and Technology Group at Hewlett Packard's Enterprise, and Douglas Gardner. He is the Chief Technologist in the CTO office of the Security Center of Excellence at Analog Devices. Doug and Jeff, welcome, and thanks for being with us today.
Yeah,
thank you.
Nice to be here. Thanks, Monica.
So their bios are online, and so you can check them, and they're both veterans in the industry. But what I would like to do is to ask them first to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what is it they're doing in this space right now, so that you get more of a context of what we're talking about. So, Jeff, do you want to go first?
Sure. I've been with Hewlett Packard Enterprise for quite a long time. And like you mentioned, I'm the CTO of this business unit called the Communications Technology Group. And we build software that goes into the heart of the operators and the service providers' networks, particularly looking at Open RAN and the issue that we're here to talk about today, Open RAN security. We're really focused on security of the entire solution and management and orchestration of that security, whether it be in a particular zone or region or covering a very wide and distributed Open RAN complex. We see it as a place where we can add value. We also see it as a place where there are security issues, as Andre talked about, that we all have to address together as we start to deal with these open interfaces and making sure we've got standards against the specifications for the APIs that hook everything together and cause it to work.
Absolutely. Thanks. Doug.
So, hello. Yeah, I'm Doug Gardner. And basically, my background is deep in security. I worked a long time in the DoD grade security and now also in the commercial grade. And basically, Analog's main interest in this is that we are clearly making some of the RF front ends, and in the new architecture, what's called the ORU, which in that architecture is gaining in complexity and processing and independence from the rest of the system in the distributed architecture. And so we have been working for a long time as to how to make our silicon secure and make sure we have good hardware roots of trust that we can then leverage up into the larger systems to make sure ORAN is secure.
Excellent. So let's get started with the tools. What is that is available? What is that it's new that is available? You know, clearly the sort of, there's some guidelines that are the same, but what is new? And for security, we have both the issue of being able to discover threats and be able to respond to them. So there's different parts, and we need to be ready both for what we know and, more importantly, for the unknown threats that might come up. So, Doug, can you run us through? You know, what is available? What is that operators can do to address this issue? I guess it's a big question, but why don't you give it a try?
All right. Well, you know, the security requirements need to overlay the different layers of the 5G system, right? I mean, we have physical, network, application, you know, so this creates a expanded threat surface than previous systems, right? And the application of threat analysis and risk management, you know, is critical to mitigating the expanded threat surfaces. The 5G flexibility and programmability give great opportunities for the higher level systems, servers and clouds performing monitoring and defensive actions. But, you know, at the same point, the double-edged sword, right, it opens up interfaces because it's distributed. So I think a great example of that is the physical separation between the ODU and the RU in the new architecture, right? We have an Ethernet link between the two of them. So prior, the ODU and the RU were kind of together. So now the ORU has to be a self-sufficient endpoint. It has to have strong security features. It has to be able to protect itself. It has to be able to, you know, do secure boot. Has to follow the zero trust rules and authenticate who it's talking to and getting commands to. And so you know, you have lots of new tools and exciting new improvements that you can roll out. And with that, a little bit of extra interfaces and things that you have to be very careful about.
Absolutely. Jeff, would you like to add something to it? You said that your view, it's the sort of end-to-end. So you two of you guys are sort of like, and we need both. We need to be focused on the element and on the end-to-end. It all has to work at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, I think Doug rightly brings up the end-to-end, and it's critically important. And it's not just from as Doug talked about, that silicon or hardware root of trust, we call it silicon root of trust. It's even goes into the supply chain, right? So we want to make sure the provenance of everything that's going into the 5G system is known, from the point at which order happens to transportation of that order to set up on a floor to integration with the rest of the system. And that has to flow all the way through the radio access network, the transport network, into the network core, into the clouds that are connecting to the core, and then ultimately the application services that are being provided across that whole complex. Another thing that I think is really important, and it's not just an RU to ODU kind of a question, and that's this notion of zero trust. We used to think of things from a perspective of perimeters. So you had this secure perimeter, you had this secure perimeter, and so on. I think today that perimeter-based security is not nearly enough, and that really we need zero trust implementation all across the entire ecosystem that ran all the way through into the core. We don't trust anything or anybody. We make sure that people and applications and systems and processes authenticate and then are enabled in order for those kind of communications to occur that complete the system.
Absolutely. And when you think about zero trust, which is a key concept here, it's very difficult to do a zero trust if you only have one player, because they basically have not to trust themselves, so to say. You know, there is no, the zero trust is not trusting others. So you need to have multiple players. But at the same time, as Doug was saying, you know, you have more complexity because you have more players, and so you have an open system, a disaggregated system. And this is all very good, but because it adds more variety. But at the same time, you have more points where a security issue can arise. So how can we address this issue? It's too much of a good thing in a way, you know what I'm saying?
So I think that this is a great question, and I'll give you the HPE viewpoint on this. So, you know, we don't view this solution as a black box that an operator or a private enterprise would install, and something goes in and something goes out, and you don't see what happens in the middle. We view this as an ecosystem of multiple vendors and partners that have to come together to provide a solution. And the nature of that multi-vendorness, as well as Open RAN being open and other parts of the specification being open, it means that, one, we have to do integration when we have a multi-vendor ecosystem, and two, when it's open, everybody can look at and observe what's going on. And I like to say that there's nothing like shining the light of day on something to be able to really see what's going on and quickly identify the problems. So while it might seem we're introducing complexity and risk by having this very open multi-vendor environment, I actually believe that what we're doing is we're opening up the solution to the light of day so that everybody can see what's going on. We have a much better opportunity to catch problems early. We have a much better opportunity to identify bad actors and get them out of the ecosystem. And frankly, I think it improves agility and security for everybody.
Absolutely. Doug, anything you would like to add to this?
Yeah, I think one of the other aspects of this is you have to have multi-layers of security and the ability of doing secure upgrades and other things, and the agility, right? The idea that we're going to design something today, and in 10 years when the system's working, there will not have been a single flaw in a single protocol or a single bit of how we implemented security is a nice dream. So you have to have flexibility and to be able to update and move around and maybe add monitoring when you uncover something else that's not so easy to change. That whole flexible concept is really about the lifecycle management, how to make a system maintain for 10 to 20 years and still be secure. That's a journey.
Absolutely. And actually, from a vendor, because so far we've been talking about from the point of view of the service provider, but as a vendor, how does it change the way you develop a product? That obviously you want it to be secure.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So when we're developing products, right, we're using a lot of those standard bodies outputs and security requirements, right, to help drive and make sure that we're handling the needed features to mitigate the risks.
Yes, and so in sort of following up on that, Doug, how useful and how important is the role of different organizations, which are maybe standard settings or industry organizations like the or an alliance. How important is their role in setting up the security sort of baseline, best practices? Because it's more than I guess it's the situation where it's not just standards. It's more than that.
Right. It's really the best practice.
Yes,
yep, best practices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
No. So what is the role that these organizations have?
So the standard setting organizations are critical, right? Because we're defining common interfaces, protocols, security requirements, and without that, you can't have that vendor equipment interoperability that is what we're saying is it needs to occur, the fair open playing field, right? And I think then that also brings in how security now is a key element, because before, where it may have been a black box created by one vendor and you had at least security by obscurity, that's gone. Right. So we already talked about it, but you move to this, zero trust model where all the independent elements have to be able to authenticate each other. You're not, you can't allow a device or a person to connect to your element and do something unless you know who it is. And then you really have to have policies around it. What data are they allowed to access? Are they allowed to change parameters in your system? And so all those really need to be figured out, and then in an interoperable way, and so that without that, it would just be unable to function. And, I'm a member of the ORAN Alliance Security Focus Group, and, we've been taking it very seriously, and I think everyone has. And, we've been, performing threat assessments. We've been reviewing security protocols, which ones are deprecated and we're not allowed to use, defining security requirements that are mandatory. So, those type of cooperative industry-led standard settings is just critical to produce that secure foundation, and also in a flexible way that we can adjust it over the lifetime to keep it secure.
Yeah, and Jeff, can you comment on that as well? I mean, as I say, you need to all work together, because clearly you can't just go in one direction. It's more than that. It's the whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
Together.
Yeah. So the standards and specifications role, in my view, is critical. We talked about the application programming interfaces. We talked, I think we touched lightly on message sets, and what the particular network function, whether it exists within the RAN architecture or back in the core. Having a standard and having a specification around those is super critical, because then you know what to expect. And if you start seeing things where people are injecting new message sets on your API, or trying to get things to piggyback along with as a payload with something else, because we have an open architecture, because we're defining those standardized interfaces, we can recognize those sorts of things and then take action very quickly. Without that, it would be wild, wild west. And so I see the role of standards bodies and bodies that are coming up with these industry specifications as highly critical and important, not only to the vendor community and to the operator community, but to government and policymakers as well. It helps them understand the way that things are supposed to be, and then advise industry if there are things that they need from their perspective that we're not yet covering.
Yeah, housekeeping note, we would like to hear from you in the audience, hear your questions. So please send them in. I should have told you, I mentioned it earlier. As soon as we have a questions from you, we'll try to address them. Although there is a few other topics that we would like to cover. And maybe you can give us now a little bit of a sort of an update of where we are at in terms of where is it you see the greatest potential and spread of Open RAN, and maybe you can also comment. Do you see, as you talk to, I'm sure a lot of operators that are deploying, what kind of feedback do you get from them? Is security a reason for or against adopting Open RAN, or is this something that it's a crucial? Yeah, I'm sure it's a crucial consideration, but what do you hear from them as well?
Yeah. So I'm going to break that down into a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So the first one on opportunity. So I think, we've seen there have been a couple of companies that have not just dipped their toe in the water, rather they have dove into the water headlong and are seeing very encouraging and interesting results. So Rakuten and Dish, they've taken greenfield opportunities and really focused on O-RAN for that. And I think that was definitely the right strategy. Amit, he talked about how he saw developing countries as a real opportunity for Open RAN. I agree with him. I think that there's another space where Open RAN can really make a material impact, and that is in enterprise communications. And as larger enterprises make decisions to operate their own private 5G networks that will interoperate with the macro networks provided by the carriers, operators, and service providers, I think Open RAN is a really logical place for that to go because it's software defined. It's going to be lower cost than the proprietary hardware. Because the private communications environment is a little more controlled, and it's greenfield for us now. It's a great place to start. And then eventually, I fundamentally believe that software will eat the world, and you'll see less and less proprietary hardware-based solutions in the RAN, and everything will eventually shift to Open RAN over time. To be honest with you, as we've been working in this space, we've seen fewer security issues than we have seen feature opportunities. And what I mean by that is, the proprietary hardware RAN, it's been around a long time, and it's got a ton of features in it. Open RAN is new, it's software-based, and its feature set is not the same as the legacy feature sets, but it's going to grow very rapidly, and it will catch up. And frankly, I think that the focus on security that's been put there has made it a fairly robust and secure solution right now. We'll see that security mature as we add features, and I think as we add features, we'll see Open RAN explode.
Absolutely. Doug, what are your...
I'm in agreement. I mean, and anytime you create open standards and you let everyone play, you have lots of innovation, ideas come out of lots of different places, and collaboration, right? You can see it even in just real simple things like threat analysis, right? one team will think of all threats 1, 2, 3, and someone else will come up with 4 and 5 that the other team didn't think of. So, there's a lot of power in collaboration and a lot of opportunity to add value, especially when you have so much software flexibility.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, the concept of openness that we usually think of it is good for like big networks. It really is very important with the enterprise, because if you ever talk to anybody in the enterprise, they complain about being the vendor lock-in even more than operators. it's so there's a huge value to that, although the design of Open RAN was not done with the enterprise in mind, but that doesn't mean that they're benefiting. But I guess that it's going to be more of it's somewhat more complex for brownfield operators who already have an established network. Can you tell us about how do you see them be able to take advantage of the opportunity?
To me, that comes it comes to planning. They have an investment. That investment has a particular depreciation associated with it. And I think that this will ultimately come down to business planning and the how and the why that they start to make the shifts versus any sort of technology big bang. And ultimately, I think that they'll find that there's an inflection point where continuing down the same path that they've continued down for, the last X number of years is not, it's not releasing the innovation that they're looking for. It's not allowing them to be as agile as their competitors. And so then they'll have to really start taking those business decisions to start stitching this technology in where it makes sense within the context of their overall business plan and strategy.
Yeah, you start thinking about all the new services and things that they could come up with to gain market share or add value and extract value in this type of open system. I mean, and then you look at the growth of wireless data and throughput. I mean, everything to me points to they're probably going to upgrade before they thought they were going to, because they want to unlock all those things.
Yep, I think you're right.
So I'm having some questions here from the audience. Okay, so there is one here about the role of government, and this is something that I also was planning to ask you. So is there, the question reads, is there a role for the government to play improving Open RAN security? So for instance, should the national labs help with the R&D? Should rules be imposed for standards? And I think this is the sort of the other question, the sort of the mirror question of one that Diane asked Amit. So how can we get help from the policy? How can from the policymakers, regulators, government, how can they help the industry?
Yeah, so the vendor community and the operator community relationship with policymakers is critical. And I see it very much as a two-way street. We have to help policymakers understand in very simple terms very complex technical topics. And then we need policymakers to do a couple of things for us. Everybody always jumps on the money bandwagon, so we need them to create some sort of an allocation. We need them to fund it. We need them to then distribute it for R&D. And I'm not saying that that's not important. Don't get me wrong. We do need government's help to extend the R&D dollar to bring the best solution that we can as quickly as we can. But even as important as doing that, I think we need policymakers to be very wary of and steer away from mandates. So like mandating that everybody that's going to do 5G standalone communications in the next year has to do it Open RAN. I think that that's a really bad idea. So mandates, I'm against those out of policymakers, and you know, I don't like to think of policy from a set of prescriptions or rules. You know, thou shalt. What we need is policymakers to come alongside us and cultivate an atmosphere of collaboration such that they're articulating to us what their needs are, and security, you know, features will definitely be part of that. And then we can take those pieces of guidance from the policymakers and make sure that those get seamed into the standards and the specifications as we start to continue to evolve this open ecosystem. So I see policymakers as helping us with not only accelerating R&D, but I also see them as helping us with accelerating the use, the needs, and the security associated with this open ecosystem.
And and I would just add to that that the commercial forces, right? That we're all highly motivated to be working on security, right? Weak security is bad business. We don't need motivation. And I think the NTIA, in their response to the FCC inquiry, they said it very well, right? They said, you should be working to foster open development and test environments, and as well as diverse domestic supply. And I think the way they can do that is fostering government-funded test beds, perhaps, where we can collaborate and validate. And then, since this is all about security in this talk, right, on these test beds, right, we should be doing security analysis and doing a continuous improvement loop, and not just waiting for things to go wrong and searching and trying to find. So I think that's where things can really be accelerated by the government or policymakers.
And how important in this context is the ability of the policymakers to collaborate with each other, because security, I mean, clearly we care about national security, but it's also a global issue, because the threat can come from everywhere, and they can, so the more open the system is, the more also global it becomes. So how important it is for governments, regulators, organizations to collaborate with each other across country borders.
Yeah.
I think it's critical. It makes me think back to, a year ago, working with State Department, and then state, using its relationships with embassies across other countries, to bring industry thinkers together and help them to align, and help the governments to align as well. So this is open. It's not just about us, and it's definitely going to take a village of all of us to make this as secure and, frankly, effective a solution as we possibly can.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like the current environment right now is a very international, right? All the teams are dialing in from all over the different countries. The only problem is we can't seem to find the perfect time slot for the whole world, and we have to go on one time source or something. It's the biggest problem we have. So it's critical. We don't want to be making, I would call it, right, if each country gets a point solution that they get to mandate, that would be a disaster.
Yeah. Unfortunately, technology is not going to solve the time problem, but we're getting better. Yes, that's right. Maybe we'll find a solution. Okay, we have another question from the audience, and it reads: open interfaces create the opportunity to insert monitoring software between layers to implement zero trust. Is anyone doing this? I would imagine it.
So I'm happy to go first. Yeah. I'm not going to mention a name, but I will tell you, we operate what we call an open 5G lab in Fort Collins, Colorado, and we invite anybody to come and partner with us to test their solution, integrate their solution with us. And we've had a couple of US vendors that are very interesting that have come to us and are demonstrating observability across not only these interface boundaries between things like the RU, DU, CU, and other NFs in the core, but they've also demonstrated the ability to observe across different IaaS, so infrastructure as a service, and platform as a service layers, and bring it all together into one monitoring solution. So there's some really fantastic innovation that's going on out there, and it's starting to occur.
Okay. So go ahead.
Well, no, I think you said it well. I don't need to add anything to that.
Okay, we are almost there, but we have a final question from the audience. And that is, are the additional security specs needed for Open RAN beyond the existing 3GPP security specs making good progress? So the question, I guess, is about 3GPP security specs and how they're impacting Open RAN.
So I can say from the Open ORAN Alliance view, right? We're basically looking at what their security specs are, and we're augmenting them where we're adding the different distributed elements. And so the 3GPP spec is a baseline, but we're going beyond that. Now we're only concentrating on what's actually applicable to ORAN, but it's a relevant foundation that we then enhance.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess that 5G is 5G for everybody. So the 3GPP foundation is there for everybody. Okay. Well, I would like to thank you so much and for sharing your thoughts. And I would like to thank the audience. I know there is many of you connected for listening to us and sending us the questions. So Jeff and Doug, thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much.
It was a great time.
Thanks to Andre, Diane, and Amit for their contribution. And it has been a great pleasure, and have a good rest of the day to all of you.